Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. This is episode 264, and we're going to talk about narratives, Luigi Mangione, and incentivizing psychopaths. So my voice is getting a little bit better slowly. It just a set time frame. It takes 2 weeks for me to go through this whole course of losing my voice and getting my voice back. But thank you for being patient. Anyway, so I saw well, you've been following the news, and obviously that healthcare CEO was gunned down by Luigi Mangione. And, I wasn't going to do an episode on this, but I saw a podcast episode on MisesMedia on YouTube, and it's called Progressivism and the Murder of a Health Insurance CEO. It's a great 8-minute video, discusses how progressives are largely responsible for the healthcare chaos, which cause weak-minded people like Luigi to commit murder, right? Totally distort history and why things are the way they are. And then because certain weak-minded individuals hear that narrative and they get so outraged that they decide they're going to do something about it. But that video, that 8-minute video, traces about 800 years of government intervention at the behest of progressives, starting from the Flexner Report of 1910 to Obamacare. And every turn you see that you have special interest groups pushing and favoring all this legislation in the name of public safety, but in reality, it's just another money-making scheme driving us all towards a single-payer system, which would basically absolutely ruin healthcare. Not that it's in any good shape now. Anyone who tries to go to a hospital where I live, it's hit or miss. Are you going to get good health care or not? And the payment structure is so convoluted, it's very hard to work all that out. And that's why it's almost a necessity to have insurance just to do the paperwork for you. But they go over that, why things are the way they are in that video. It's excellent. You should watch it. And so then after watching that, I was thinking, well, I can't compete against that. I have talked about the Flexner Report before, the racial implications of that report. I can't remember which episode it was. I did a search. I can't find it, but it does require a narrative. Now, a narrative is just a story that a scholar will tell. Like, he's not going to call it a story. Here, I'm going to tell you my story or my version of the story, because to use that word is kind of childish, and it becomes easy to realize that it's partly false. And so you circumvent all of that doubt by just simply calling it a narrative. And we were taught, how to do narratives. I've talked about this before, again, in another episode, I can't recall which, where neo-Marxism, I believe it's the Frankfurt School of Marxism, basically is basically telling you how to create a narrative in a way that it supports whatever it is that you want to do. Whether it's legitimate or not doesn't matter. You're creating a story. And the great thing about a narrative is that the person who's writing the narrative gets to start the story anywhere they want, right? And I keep going back to this because I think it was pretty unfair. But when Putin started going into the history of Ukraine and he went back, I don't know, 600 years or 1400 years to talk about the history of Ukraine, a lot of people dissed him for that. But if you think about it, what he's doing is he's starting the narrative so far back in history that you can't say that he's, favoring a certain outcome. He's trying to get you to realize, this is the reality, right? So we went back over 1,000 years to show you that this is the reality. And so don't listen to what you're hearing on your mass media that all of a sudden we decided that we were going to invade Ukraine, but that this part, this region has always been part of Russia. That's what he was trying to do. He was trying to rewrite the narrative, right? And he can do that because he is the author of that narrative. Guaranteed that the way that people are doing narratives today is to portray their desired character as the hero. And so people who are talking about Luigi now, the guy who, the murderer, they start the story by saying, hey, he killed a greedy CEO. Nothing about the history. Nothing about the history of even the CEO, whether they have a family or not, whether now his children are orphans, or fatherless, none of that. You're not going to talk about government involvement and activity in crafting all these healthcare laws, which result in healthcare industry in the way that it is. I've talked about my parents before. I was born in the 60s. They didn't have insurance, and the OBGYN charged my father uh, lectures, right? So basically, she said that in exchange for paying for her services, all he had to do was be the last appointment of the day, and he was required to give her a lecture on philosophy. My father did a PhD in philosophy of religion, and so that's all he would do. He would just come in, give a lecture, and that was the payment. And it was kind of a barter system. And you could only do that because the cost of healthcare was so low in the 60s. And now it's ridiculous. Like 10 years ago, just the cost of delivery alone, the night of delivery when you're born, was $42,000. And there's no way that my father would have been able to get away with a checkup for a lecture. It never would happen. And that's the problem, right? You're not going to talk about that side of the story of who made it so expensive, who made it so ridiculous. No, you're not going to talk about that. You're going to start with greedy CEO. It's this person's fault. That's why everyone is having trouble getting insurance, having their insurance actually cover the procedures that they need to have covered. And so we're not going to have a story of a deluded Ivy League brainwashed psychopath killed someone who's in charge of running a company, who's navigating the jungle of government regulations designed to put it out of business. We're not going to tell that story, right? We're going to tell a narrative where Luigi is a hero and he killed a greedy CEO. You can see this also with Ukraine and Israel, even World War II, right? World War II did not start on December 7th, 1941. And don't say it started with the invasion of Poland either. But the war between the United States and Japan started with the sanctions, right? The trade sanctions that were imposed on Japan in the 1930s. And because they were trying to starve Japan into submission, Japan had to start invading all of these areas that had the natural resources that those countries refused to trade with Japan. Okay. So you see that going on. And once you introduce that aspect of World War II, it kind of changes. It changes what you think of World War II, what you think of the Japanese, what you think of America and FDR and all this other kind of stuff. So depending on who you ask and depending on how that person tells you the narrative, the story of what just happened, you're going to walk away with a different impression. All right. So today, a bunch of my eighth grade female students asked me what I thought of Luigi. Right. So they're eighth grade girls. All right. And, I guess they heard stories about Luigi, about, I guess, on TikTok or whatever, where a lot of people were saying that he was really good looking. That's what I thought that they had seen. And so then that's why they asked me. And so me thinking that that's why they were asking me, I said, man, he's a really hot murderer, right? He's a murderer, but he's really oh so hot or something like that. And so it got a laugh, right? Because and which basically means, yeah. So they saw people who wanted Luigi to be set free because he's so good looking and because he's such a hero. And I brought up a picture of him, without his shirt on, with his washboard abs and his killer good looks, that dark, what do you call that? Dark and mysterious. What was that? Uh, uh, Tall, dark, and handsome, right? So is that dark kind of thing where you can say, well, this guy's a really good looking guy. And then I go on and I say, think about all these people who fall for this guy, right? He's a murderer. He's probably a psychopath, right? I mean, there's that picture of him smiling after he killed this CEO and he pedaled away on his bike. He was smiling. He was happy, which is generally, if you listen to people who had to take someone's life, that's not the normal reaction. You're not celebrating. You're not happy, right? It shakes you up. And so, I went into that and I talk about, these are eighth grade girls, Christian girls in a Christian school, and probably not as naive as girls when I was in eighth grade, but nevertheless, soon to be women. So I talk about how a lot of people get caught up in appearances. And so as soon as you see someone, you construct their personality based on their appearance. And you hope and you imagine and even fantasize that the person's character actually matches the one that you created for that person. So most people, never take the time to realize, or maybe they refuse to believe that the actual person, the actual personality of the person is not the reality, but that their fantasy of that person is the reality, right? And it also often crosses my mind that people who are spouses to abusers, right? You know, is it that they continually live in the dream in spite of the harshness of their reality? I wonder if that's kind of what's going on. And so then I went on to talk about how today people are trained to be superficial, right? And you hear things in society like, or in movies and TV shows, no matter what you did in your past, I'll still love you, that kind of thing, which I guess is kind of romantic maybe when you hear it, but think about it. Hey, I'm actually a psychopathic murderer. But hey, that doesn't matter. You still love me, right? So, but it does matter, right? For the sake of a movie, for a TV show, okay, whatever. But let's get down to brass tacks, shall we? It does matter. I mean, what you did in the past, it matters because then you get to say, did you really change or are you faking it? What do I have to be aware of? This you have to come clean, right? And so I thought about it some more after I came home and I was thinking, in a more financially sound society, people are incentivized to be more honest and responsible, right? With all this liquidity, with all this inflation that's in our society today, people are almost able to afford irresponsibility and not checking up on people, right? It's a lot easier to fake it today than it is to be honest. And people are attracted to the fake, right? They're attracted to irresponsibility. They're attracted to, you know, uh, just psychopaths as long as they look really good. Uh, so I think in a fiscally responsible society, a hard money society, a society where inflation is impossible because currency and money is not in the control of the government, then there would still people who would fantasize, right? Oh, that guy is so hunky. I bet his personality matches his appearance, which is what a lot of people believe, right? You'll still hear that, but more people would know it's a fantasy, right? It's not true, which is why I kind of appreciate some of the old fairy tales that are rewritten from another perspective, to sort of give another side of the story. There was a Cinderella story I remember I heard. I think Wicked also is sort of like that, or the one with Charlize Theron where she's the Wicked Witch, or was it Angelina Jolie? I forget. One of those movies where it was a misunderstanding. I thought that was kind of interesting. So you'll kind of see, uh, perhaps other more interesting characters, right? But the fantasy character, the simplistic, simple, plain kind of character would be, easily recognized as kind of a fantasy, or that would be actually true, that this person really is what they say that they are. And if that was the norm of society, like people could see through fakeness, lies, this sort of hunky appearance with nothing, no content of character. It's just all appearance, right? Like if people were trained to be able to spot that and to see that quickly, then the incentive would be on building your character and your resume, right? So it's not just your appearance, but it's who you are, the kind of person you are, and what you've done with your life. And it used to be that, especially in the Asian community, if you went to an Ivy League school, that meant something, right? It meant that you worked hard, you studied hard. And yes, I didn't go to an Ivy League school, okay? So, but that's the thing, right? You worked hard, which means as a spouse, you'll probably be a responsible person. Now it doesn't mean anything. Asians are a little bit slow to change in that shifting valuation, right? But eventually they will, and they'll realize that spending all that money simply to get the Ivy League thing is actually, the best way to lose your children to this, leftist, neo-Marxist, uh, fantasy. And so basically, if you have this where the incentives in society are to focus on your character, right? Building your personality, building, the kind of person that you are, to be an honest, reliable, dependable, hardworking person, so that your resume, what you have accomplished and achieved in your life actually matters, right? Then even psychopaths will be incentivized to live better lives. Here's the definition of a psychopath. It's a personality construct characterized by impaired empathy and remorse, in combination with traits of boldness, disinhibition, and egocentrism, like killing a CEO and then smiling about it. These traits are often masked by superficial charm and immunity to stress, which can create an outward appearance of apparent normalcy. That's how he could have gone to McDonald's afterwards and totally appear normal, right? So that person, a psychopath who will just simply follow incentives, like what seems to be the best choice to make, right? Well, it won't be to commit murder, right? This person, and they say he's really smart, like IQ over 130, which is genius IQ, right? So he's clearly smart, he's intelligent, he's got everything going in his life, but all of the incentives that he was given was not to be productive, but to be destructive, not to create, but to destroy. And I believe that in a free society where the true incentives, truly good incentives will be advertised, will be much clearer, right? You won't have all this misinformation, all this narrative, fake information, right? Trying to create and stir up people's emotions. So then you're going to respond and act with no knowledge. Instead, you're going to be manipulated into be angry with your emotions, with your lack of knowledge. And so you can see that everywhere in our society. The current structure, the educational system, rewards destruction, rewards destructive behavior like neo Marxists, virtue signalers, BLM, Karens, they do all of their destructive things and they don't go to jail. They're not fined. They're not punished, right? They're not physically punished. They're not financially punished. They're not. And so instead, they're being rewarded. It becomes an occupation. It becomes a way to make a living. And so, in a freer society where we have honest money, where we don't have this intrusive government taking over all of our education and sort of brainwashing everybody, people will have better information. And so, this poor soul, Luigi, right? Instead of acting on all this bad information, misinformation, being manipulated by people who should have protected him, who should have, led him to a productive life, he might have found a way instead of committing murder. He might have found a way to teach freedom in Syria, right? I mean, look at those killer good looks. I mean, he could have gone over there, right? Start a school, a YouTube business, whatever, and taught freedom, right? I mean, even that, even if he only got like a few viewers, hey, that would have been much better than taking someone else's life, and that's kind of the situation, that's sort of the thread of thinking that, I got into today, combination of my eighth grade students and also listening to that MisesMedia video. That's it for today. Hopefully, a little food for thought, stirring up some ideas for yourself and trying to figure out how to make the world a better place instead of just sort of looking at the world implode all around us. I'll talk to you guys next time.